The chandelier fractures the room into 1,000 diamonds. They fall across linen and lacquer, across faces that have learned to read the price tag on every smile. Lina Harris steps into that light as if into another life, hands trembling not from cold but from the gravity of the night. She wears a borrowed dress that hangs on her like a wish. Around her, the city's finest orbit the long table. Governors' wives, textile magnates, hedge fund lords, editors who write obituaries for reputations the morning after. Michael stands at the head of the table, a carved smile, a glass raised like a judge's gavel. She thinks of the job that brought her here. 2 years folding uniforms in Michael's building, delivering late-night invoices and soft smiles. She thinks of the nights he'd stand in the doorway, indifferent, until the company made him praised and he made her promised. She thinks of the small, absurd necklace she keeps hidden beneath the collar of her dress, a ring of hammered silver with a tiny, off-center blue stone. It is the only thing she saved from the past she cannot name, the only scrap she would not sell, even for rent. She has never shown it to him. Tonight, she plans to give herself away and gain something she has never had, belonging. The first horn of laughter slices the air, sharp, practiced. The room knows a joke before it lands. Michael's voice rings with polished charm as he thanks everyone for coming. He tells a story about 2 improbables who became convenient. He calls Lina our quiet foundation, and the world around her applauds the image they've built for him. Lina feels a thread of warmth. Maybe this is the night she becomes more than a shadow in an elevator. Then he reaches into his breast pocket and pulls out a small black box. The hand that offers it is steady, sweetened with the rehearsal of 1,000 perfect proposers. Everyone leans forward. Cameras click, catching the glass in the chandelier catching light. The box opens to reveal an emblem, not a ring, a polished crest, old and heavy, the Shapiron emblem, a raised sigil, an ornate knot of wolves and crowns. It is not Michael's to give, Lina realizes with a cold animal comprehension. The crest is a family mark. Someone murmurs. Michael's smile shifts like a cloud crossing the moon. He doesn't look at Lina. He places the emblem into the palm of Vivian Lane, a woman whose uniform past reads differently now, delivery girl who rose into the room like an argument. Vivian's laugh is bright. She wears a gown with a neckline that says, "I belong here," and a confidence practiced like choreography. She accepts the crest with a small performative bow. The crowd applauds as if they were awaiting this exact moment. "You deserve this," Michael says, to Vivian, not to Lina. For the board, for the city, for... His gaze slides over Lina, then away. For the future. Lina's world condenses into one terrible, slow beat. The room tilts. A chop of camera shutters. Faces she only half knows arrange themselves into a net of interest and insinuation. Someone's laugh becomes a sharpened blade. Michael's whisper to Vivian is audible, impossible not to hear. "You'll protect the legacy. You'll handle the family side. You're perfect for the part." A plate shatters in Lina's hands. The sound is a small apocalypse. A woman at the far end gasps theatrically. Someone calls out, "Oh, what a lovely surprise." A man turns his phone to film. Vivian cradles the crest like an heirloom she has rehearsed inheriting. The bright room tilts darker. The chandelier seems less forgiving. "It belongs to my family," Lina says, too small, the words tumbling like coins dropped from a height. The world expects a little actress now, astonishment and then removal. Michael's face freezes. No, not because of shame, but because her claim is inconvenient. "Sweetheart," he says to Lina, in a tone designed to tuck her back into the pocket of shame, "we never said it was yours." The table's instruments click into place. Whispers, the scrape of chairs, the little smiles that inventory a good scandal. Someone, one of Michael's supporters, raises a hand, theatrically curious. Delivery girl claims a family crest? A ripple of laughter, like a disposable thing, spreads. Heads turn, phones raise. The room smells suddenly of perfume and danger and the old metallic sweetness of blood that might be in anyone's mouth if the night continues. Lina feels the room pressing in. She hears her own heartbeat as if it's not inside her, but in the padded hush of the veil. Her fingers close against the hidden necklace beneath her collar. She remembers the story her grandmother told. An old man left it behind at the stall. She was told to keep it safe. And how every time someone asked about the past, the family folded too quickly into other words. She breathes in, trying to find steadiness, and the light on the off-center blue stone of her hidden necklace catches like a single, stubborn promise. No one sees it. Not yet. Vivian smiles in that way that means a contract has been signed in the air. This isn't theater, she says, voice smooth, practiced. This is legacy. The Sheprin are careful. We have papers. It is a soft kind of violence, legal language wielded like a club. Michael gestures, and a man in a dark suit, Kevin, steps forward with documents that smell faintly of lawyer's cologne and polished leather. He produces a folder with verifiable names, signatures, old seals. He lays them on the table as if proof could be translated into the shape of a verdict against Lina's life. The Sheprin family arrives like a second tide. 3 brothers, Lucas, Logan, Leon, move through the crowd with a confidence that doesn't care for small talk and cares even less for social niceties. They are impeccably dressed, their steps measured for a room that pays attention to subtle escalations of power. Their chatter recedes. The sheeran gaze runs across the table and rests on the crest in Vivian's hand, then the small tightness on Lina's throat, and something in Lucas's face, an almost imperceptible tightening, makes whispers avalanche into interest. "Is there a dispute?" Lucas asks, voice low but resonant. For a moment, Michael's show recoils. The brothers' presence rearranges the evening. The air itself takes a step back. The shearing name in the room is like the word stop in a language everyone understands. Vivian's grip on the emblem tightens. "I'm honored," she says, because honor smells like endorsement. In the crowd, some faces smile like predators, satisfied by a small demonstration of taste. Others look at Lina like a stray who wandered on to someone else's property. Alfred, small and stooped and suddenly very visible at the foot of a high chair, makes his way forward with the deliberate slowness of a man who has watched more than he is allowed to tell. He has been Lina's guardian in a way the room could not legislate. A caretaker, the keeper of a secret who has always stood a little outside the glitter. Tonight his palms are steady. His eyes find Lina like a lighthouse. "That necklace," he says, voice dry as paper, "belongs to the lineage." The word lineage sits in the chandeliers like a dropped charm. Conversations crouch. Eyes search for an explanation, history in one line, a narrative everyone can digest. Logan lifts his glass as if to measure the truth. Lion watches the crowd like watching prey. Michael's jaw tightens, his smile frays. "This isn't the time for family tales," he says. "We have documents. We have a clear transfer drawn up and notarized. Vivian has the board's support. This," he gestures dismissively toward Alfred, "this is sentimental." "Paper can be forged," Lucas says, and his voice drops farther, so the room can feel it in its spine. The implication is small and enormous at once. The sheeran do not take their mark lightly. A single word, the right turn of a head, can unmake reputations. The brothers convene a small private council at the head of the table. Conversation tightens, body language sharpened. They ask for the necklace to be produced. Lina's fingers are quick, clumsy, desperate as she lifts the chain and places the small hammered silver over the table between 2 pristine plates. It looks too ordinary beside the crest, cheap, domestic, a thing of different origins.
A man in the crowd tuts. Vivian angles her head, mockingly magnanimous. "Let us be clinical," Logan says, "no theatrics." They bring out instruments, a flashlight with a narrow blue beam, a small UV lamp borrowed from a nearby institute, a camera set on a tripod like an oracle. The first test will be visual. Family crest designs often carried micro-etchings, the old families their own signature marks. They will use light to interrogate metal.
It is a demonstration less of truth than of spectacle, an old and trusted method to separate the authentic from the convenient. The violet lamp sweeps over the crest in Vivian's hand. It glows under the beam with a subtle map of filigree, lines that spell a history none of the younger guests remember. Vivian smiles the way one smiles holding a borrowed harp. Then the lamp passes over Lina's small ring. For a second, under the violet wash, something in the silver takes a different breath. A faint, almost indiscernible line glows, an etched symbol so small it disappears when someone tries to point it out. "No," says one of Michael's men. The room's tenor hardens. Vivian lifts the crest slightly, showing it to the brothers. Lucas nods, just once. "It matches the registry," he says, voice that closes argument. The registry is the altar of their world. It has the power to sanctify. But we'll need a proper verification. We'll follow legal protocol. They call for a fingertip test, a simple biometric push. Here, the spectacle grows more official. Electronic readers and sealed envelopes, a trace of bureaucratic dignity to flatten rumor. They insist on identification. Security flanks the table like bookends. Cameras angle for reaction shots, the flash, the close-up of a hand sliding an impression. Lina watches as technicians tape envelopes, label samples with neat clinical handwriting. Someone places a swab under a sterile foil. Her name is called out by an official who cannot look her in the eye. She steps forward. Her hand shakes. The reader denies her. An error code flashes. Gasps curl like smoke from a candle. "It's a malfunction," she says, too loudly, too pleading. A man near the back bursts into a laugh designed to puncture. "Of course it's a malfunction. Everyone knows the machines prefer names with trust." Whispers coagulate into consensus. The machine is impartial, but people are not. The glowing check marks rest with Vivian. The narrative slides away from Lina like a sheet pulled by a thief. "Perhaps we should run a DNA module," one of the technicians suggests. The words are clinical, but the room thins in response. DNA becomes a more modern oracle. It promises finality and can wear the face of science like armor. The brothers nod. They want closure. They are careful men. They do not make rulings by rumor. Michael's smile is a closed thing. Vivian's shoulders rise with the ease of someone who expects to be coronated. Cameras capture the moment, the angle of her jaw like a practiced actress's. Alfred watches quietly, the lines at the corner of his eyes etched deeper with something like grief. When the technicians take Lina's swab for the DNA test, one of them is brusque, practiced. He seals the sample, writes a code in a ledger. The ledger sits heavy, the ink a seal. Lynn's name on it is like a knot. He watches as the sample slides into a tray. A man in a dark suit steps close to the technician and murmurs something inaudible. The technician's hand hesitates, then is resolute again. The collection room hums with fluorescent light. Lina sits on a plastic chair, the slats cold beneath her. Through the frosted glass, she can see the silhouettes of the brothers pacing, of Michael and Vivian exchanging looks, of cameras tilting on tripods like mechanical birds. She tries not to imagine the result. She tries to keep the necklace in the place of personal truth it always was. But a lawyer's hand has already folded the paper that will take what was hers if they choose the wrong story. News travels fast. A wave of messages hits Michael's phone. Old contacts, board members, people who can sign their signatures in minutes if instructed. The city is a network of small favors, and favors are currency. They have already rehearsed contingencies, how to move a deed, whom to call for a notarized attestation in the dead of night. The Sharon can make the legal slow fast if they decide to. Lina is escorted back into the ballroom while the DNA sample goes to an on-site lab. Cameras angle. The room's light seems to slice her into two images, the Lina who arrived with a modest smile, and the Lina who is now the subject of a rumor. That smells of claim and shame. Michael's friends study her with a detached interest, who she is in social capital and how quickly she can be rewritten. Vivian sits with the crest at her throat like a talisman. People tweet. By the time the first results come through, the mood has grown colder. The UV test on Lina's ring shows no clear match. Under close scrutiny, the line the lamp showed dissolves into imperfection. The official reads the report and says something carefully neutral. No conclusive match. It is not a verdict, it is a gap, a hole the room expects someone to fill. Not conclusive, Michael repeats, as if translating it into a weapon. We will proceed with the DNA. The outcome there will be final. The DNA, this is the performance. Sealed boxes opened, technicians in gloves. They treat it like a religious rite. Vivian's sample is run. The graph hums and prints out numbers that make the room nod. Her results are clean and precise. Someone with a practiced hand could make them so. A man in a tailored suit could take a victory lap. Then Lina's results arrive. They are muddied. A smear of contamination, the technician says. Integrity is compromised. We cannot certify these results. The laughter begins again, but this time edged with cruelty. Someone jokes about delivery girls and their neck for mixing up bags. Someone else suggests more tests, older rites, blood binding, something archaic and showy. The brothers who have let the room play until legalities decide now exchange tight looks. If the lab cannot certify, Lucas says, then we need an older proof. Old proof in the world of the Sharon is not always scientific.
They carry rituals, heritage tests, marks that a family keeps in secret places. They possess relics that respond in ways only an initiated few believe. Tonight, in a room that breathes money and theater, a ritual would be both entertainment and authority. It is the one thing the modern documents cannot convincingly replicate. Leon brings forward a small wooden box, carved with the Chiron knot. He opens it like a priest revealing a talisman. Inside sits a small wrought dagger with an amber stone inlaid in its hilt. It is not a weapon for violence, it is ceremonial. Its purpose is attestation, the kind that operates as much on the weight of tradition as on the fact itself. Blood, Leon says simply, a drop from the hand of the claimant placed against the relic. If lineage exists, the stone will darken. It has always done so. A hush follows, a collective inhale. Some in the room look scandalized. Some appear thrilled by the sense of drama. The ritual is archaic, almost theatrical, and yet, in the Chiron context, its humiliation can be formal and conclusive. To perform it is to be declared either true or forever disgraced. Lina reads the faces. Journalists who will print either redemption or ruin. Rivals who will remember whichever verdict becomes the city's story. This is not binding outside a family, Michael says, his voice quick as steel. But it is decisive in their eyes. It will end the argument. He is right. The Chiron word is the city's undercurrent. To be owned by them is to have power. To be rejected is to have the city turn against you. Alfred moves before anyone else can shout. He steps forward, cane tapping, and places his palm on Lina's shoulder with the familiarity of decades. If you are to undergo it, Lina, he says quietly, looking at her not as if she were the subject of the city's gossip, but as if he were giving a small child permission to bring a skinned knee. Do it with courage. She stares down at her hands, the necklace now on the surface of the table between two histories. The thought of blood on her skin makes her head swim. But the eyes of those who have spat at her tonight, those faces that have already decided her role, are the ones that push her into motion. She will not be a cautionary tale in a paper column. She will not be the village rumor that laughs at the wrong people. She will not give them that comfort. She draws a small knife from a sheath she keeps in her clutch.
One she had bought years ago at a market stall because the world felt less dangerous when she could cut a thread tied to her wrist. The blade is clean. She does not intend injury. She tests it by slicing her palm lightly, a shallow line she can count, a circle of red that looks both brave and absurd. Her blood wells, bright and immediate. Alfred steps forward with the relic, his fingers steady, the old rituals heavier from the way his voice has been trained to not tremble. The amber stone in the dagger touches her blood.
For a heartbeat, nothing happens. The room leans in as if breath could quicken the world. Then the stone darkens, just a little, like the way a bruise blooms. A murmur, a single step back. It is not a magnetic, impossible reaction. It is faint. But in a room that wants evidence, faint is often enough to ignite hope. "Hold," Lucas says, the brothers closing ranks like a silent command. They call for witnesses. A paper is prepared for signatures. Cameras pivot to capture the exact moment. Lenses close in on the amber and the red like vultures on fresh meat. The ritual is half religion and half dramatic flourish. In this city, the two often look the same. Someone in the crowd, a woman who had laughed earlier, records with her phone. The screen is small, but carries a weight that can move from hand to hand across the city in an hour. Then the moment fractures. A technician, distracted since the DNA sample leak of the labeling, whispers across the table to a man in a suit. The chain of custody was broken. Samples were switched. The words are small. They seem like a clumsy accusation born from human error. Michael's shoulders tighten. Vivian's expression shifts from ease to a practiced alarm. "Switched?" someone cries. The man with the ledger, the one who wrote down the sample codes, looks very suddenly not sure. A crease forms between his brows. He glances at the sealed envelopes as if seeing them for the first time. He starts. Vivian's face hardens. She takes a step forward, a predatory clarity shaping her. "We cannot allow speculation," she says. "We need certainty. We ask the brothers to postpone decisions." Lucas interrupts with the cold patience of someone who has extinguished many small flames. "We will not be guinea pigs for incompetence," he says. "If the chain was compromised, we execute another test, but in public." "Public?" Michael's laugh is brittle. He sees the threads tying the room together and pulls with the impatience of a man who cannot afford to lose the narrative. "We have deadlines. Investors will not wait on ritual and rumor." Alfred watches the exchange with a patient sadness. "Not all power is gained by delay," he mutters. He leans closer to Lina and says, "They want a clean story tonight, child. That is their hunger. We have something else." Before anyone can ask what he is talking about, a small, unexpected sound breaks through the clamor. A cough, then a whisper. It comes from a corner where cameras are not trained, but where eyes linger out of habit. A frail man in a coat that has seen better days stands partially concealed beneath a hanging tapestry. He looks like the sort of person the world forgets as soon as a headline moves on. But his voice is clear. "You're making a mistake," he says to the brothers. "That piece," he nods at the crest in Vivian's hand, "was passed through many hands last week. I saw it. It's been cleaned. The registry papers, they were reprinted." The room goes very still. Michael's face crumples with the quick fear of a man who is suddenly placed where he least wants to be, in a theater with imperfect lighting, with an audience that might not be his. Vivian's smile falters. The journalists fumble for their phones. Lucas looks at the frail man as if trying to find where his words came from. "Who are you?" Logan asks. "My name is Alfred," the man says, but not the Alfred who has been Lina's steady presence. This Alfred has a different cadence, a memory of the man who raised questions when truths were convenient. He shows his hands, calloused, scarred in honest ways, and reaches, finally, toward the small necklace at the center of the table. Lina's ears fill with a sound that is almost like music. Gasps, the scrape of a chair, a silence that promises a storm. The frail man's gaze meets hers,
And for an instant, she sees the history behind his eyes. Not a rumor, not a legend, a map. He says only, "You're not alone." Someone at the back laughs, now not to deride, but to mask the way the balance shifts. "Old stories," he says, but his voice is less compelled by certainty and more by denial. Vivian's supporters shift forward like a small pack. Michael's allies tighten. The brothers remain statues, measured, dangerous, waiting for the squeal of events to decide how to move. For a moment, it looks like the evening will fracture into 1,000 petty wars. Then the kitchen doors open, and the man who runs Michael's private security, Captain Luis, steps forward with a manila envelope, the kind that in this world carries more than paper. He places it on the table with the efficiency of someone who knows how to close a scene. Inside are signatures, the names of board members, the legal drafts predicting a transfer of shares, the positions designed to make this easier. He slides the papers toward Michael and Vivian like an offering. But even as the papers slide, someone else moves across the floor with a different urgency. Jason Reed, a CEO that most of the room respects as a man who can make small regulations feel like commandments. He is not Chiron, but he carries his own influence, a network that bends markets. He arrives with a terse nod for Lucas. "If there's tampering," he says without flourish, "I stand with transparency. I will sign an interim order to stall any transfer until a proper chain of custody review. If someone forged documents, they will pay a legal penance." Legal penance is a polite way of describing a slap that will bruise reputations if wielded well. It will not be immediate vengeance, but it will be the city's version of justice, slow, visible, and damaging to those whose hands are sticky. Michael's jaw clamps. Vivian's hand flexes around the crest. To the crowd, the city hummed with possibility. Scandal is a currency, and tonight's is rich. For Lina, the night's edges blur into a shape that looks like opportunity or trap.
She has suffered the public humiliation. Her cheeks have been burned with the hot ash of ridicule. But now, evidence claimed and counterclaimed, a small group of people take positions that could dismantle the narrative handed to her. Alfred's recognition, the frail man's voice, and the cry of tampering shift the room's axis ever so slightly away from her ruin and toward interrogation, toward the possibility that the story is not yet written. If you're already hooked, hit subscribe to see how she fights back. The room pulses with the electricity of suspended conclusions. The brothers confer, lips moving like foxes deciding whether to pounce. Jason Reed's promise to stall the transfer buys Lina a fragile shelter. Time. Enough time to breathe and enough time for someone else to act. They take the documents and call an impromptu meeting in the private boardroom at the back, a room of cool stone and glass where men and women in expensive shoes and colder minds will choose the shape of the morning's headlines. Lina is not permitted to attend. She watches through a slatted window as boards are moved into position and a line of men and women who treat power like an instrument prepare to play. She is escorted to a small antechamber, a room that smells of old coffee and fresh lemon. A receptionist tries to be kind with a voice that markets sympathy as a product. There's panic wrapped beneath the surface. Cameras outside, feeds lighting up. Michael paces. Vivian sits with her crest steady, a queen whose crown is not yet secure. Alfred joins Lina in the room. His face is a map of choices he has resisted for years. "When I was young," he says, "I knew a girl who hit a mark. She kept it like a secret light. People mocked her, then they feared her. The light was never the thing that made them fear. It was what the light told them about who's willing to stand for themselves." Lina presses the necklace to her palm, feeling the warm spot where her blood dried earlier. "I don't know who I am," she says, and it is honest. The truth has no showbiz polish. "You will," Alfred replies, and there is no theatrical boast in his voice. "But you must know, blood will make men either kneel or throttle. It will make lawyers meticulous and friends frantic.
It is not about rightness, it is about who can survive the cost. Outside, the private boardroom calls votes into a shape that will either elevate or bury her. Inside that room, a man who speaks for the Sheeran patriarch, a representative no one photographs, a silhouette of decisions, finally demands attention. He is not the old man. He is younger, perhaps by decades, but older by the tone his presence brings. He does not sit. He stands like an accusation. "You will not make this a circus," his voice says when he permits himself to be heard. "If someone tampered tonight, we will know. If someone forged, we will find out. But we will not decide by heart alone. Evidence will rule."
His words are both promise and threat, a line drawn in an invisible part of the map. He departs without explanation, leaving behind a smell of old tobacco and intentions that are not charitable. The brothers look at each other with the calculus of men who balance advantage against risk. They call for security audits, for forensics, for a sealed process that will take the rest of the night and the next morning to complete. For Lina, this is both defense and further humiliation. The city's mechanisms will now take her life apart and put it under glass for the public to stare at. Her blood, her necklace, the small story her grandmother told, everything will be splayed like evidence in the hands of people who crave narrative control. She sits in the antechamber while the world decides how to make her into a cautionary headline or a rightful heir. She thinks of the frail man who spoke up, the man named Alfred who had been in 2 places at once, the brothers who say they want proof that can't be bought. She thinks of Michael, who had the chiseled smile that the press liked, and realizes that the man who scorned her is no longer just an ex. He is an architect of the story that could ruin her. The night stumbles toward a quieter hour. The board votes to delay any legal transfer until an independent firm verifies chain of custody. Cameras retreat, but their lenses remain hungry and, like certain secrets, patient. Michael departs in a car that smells of leather and furtive calls. Vivian leaves with the crest still clutched, a weight colder in her palm than she expected. Alfred stands up, shoulders bent by 1,000 things. "You should rest," he says. "Tomorrow we'll move." He speaks as if tomorrow will be simple and as if the city is a chessboard that plays fair. Lina laughs, and the sound is out of place in a room of peeling wallpaper and stale lemon. She is exhausted, raw, and alive. For the first time that night, she understands the shape of what might be hers if she survives the night's narrative. Not simple belonging, but a power that will demand currency and cost. She thinks of the Sharon name, of how the brothers watched, and how the patriarch's emissary trod softly like a shadow. The phrase, "the most dangerous man," had just been a rumor in the city. Tonight, it acquires form. Not a man stepping into the room, but the outline of power that would take a life and make it its own. Outside, the city hums. Inside, Lina folds herself into the narrow bed of the small room that is temporarily hers, the necklace a small weight against her collarbone. She falls asleep with the taste of copper in her mouth and the lamp's light painted across the ceiling like a veteran's medal. When she wakes, the day will be a different thing. Reports will write themselves, people will take their positions, and someone, maybe an old guardian, maybe a CEO, maybe a silhouette of a man who commands fear like currency, will light a fuse. She does not know yet how to wage the war that could return her dignity, but she knows one simple fact. Humiliation stings, it teaches, and it can be the coal that starts a fire. Tonight hurt her, tomorrow perhaps will shape her. The world moves. The Chiron brothers send a car. Jason Reed files a hold. Michael counts his allies. Vivian practices a smile that will survive headlines. Alfred files into the shadows where he keeps secrets. Lina, small and unassuming, holds a necklace that could be a relic, a fake, or a key. The chessboard is set, and the first pieces have moved. A knock comes at the door in the gray hour between night and dawn. Lina answers it to find a man in a suit who does not look like he belongs to Michael's circle. His tie is exact, his shoes precise. He carries no fanfare, only an envelope. He does not look like the patriarch, but his presence has weight. He looks at Lina and says simply, "Miss Harris, we need your signature." His voice is low. Something in it asks for a contract and offers an option at the same time. He offers a pen. Lina takes the pen. She does not yet know if signing will make her free or bind her tighter to chains she cannot see. She thinks of Alfred and the frail man's words, of the brother's silence, of Michael's betrayal. Her hand steadies. She places her thumb against the ink and lets the story continue to fold itself open. The night has not resolved its argument. The city has not yet chosen the ending. Outside, someone whispers a name like a prayer and like a warning, Chiron. The word moves through the morning light and carries with it the weight of a family that does not forgive quickly and never forgets. The signature is a small sound, a mark that will perhaps be amplified into headlines, lawsuits, and meetings with men who arrange fortunes on a whim. Lina presses down, forms her name, and hands the paper back. The man slides it into the envelope, his fingers closing like a promise or a threat, she cannot tell which. As the city awakens, the first public narrative of the night will be written in headlines. But inside quiet rooms and behind locked doors, a quieter story begins to move. A web of investigations, allies gathering in whispers, and the slow, certain turn of people who understand the currency of blood and the cost of a name. Lina Harris, once humiliated at the altar, now finds herself at the precipice, not of victory, not yet, but of an ascent that will require cunning, patience, and a readiness to wield the power others would have taken from her. Beyond the windows, the Chiron emblem rests for the moment in a hand that is not hers. But nothing in their world is permanent. Claims can be challenged, papers can be retracted, stories can be rewritten. Tonight, the city learned that the crest could be both a crown and a cudgel. Tomorrow, the fight will be about which it becomes. Lina bows her head, fingers brushing the small blue of her necklace.
The bruise of the ritual on her palm stings. She tastes resolve in the back of her throat. The night has done its worst. The morning will test whether it is enough. There is a final note of sound before the scene folds. Far away, a car door slams, a phone rings, someone laughs and then does not. A silhouette watches from the other side of the glass, anonymous and calculating. The most dangerous names move like chess pieces, and tonight they have merely been rearranged. Lina rises, shoulders straightening. Humiliation has been suffered. Now strategy must be born. The pen slides into the envelope like a hinge closing on a life. When the man in the exact suit pockets the paper, he looks at Lina with a neutrality that could be mercy or calculation. Outside, the city warms into day. Inside, the engines of reputation and money begin to grind. By mid-morning, the castle of glass and stone that holds Michael Jones's empire smells faintly of coffee and old fear. Phones light up with messages that move like insects, urgent, directional, impossible to ignore. Jason Reed sends a terse text to Lina's small number. "Come to my office, now." He arrives with a lawyer at his shoulder and an expression that reads, "If this burns, it will burn clean." Lina steps into Jason's suite and feels the air change, cool, conditioned with the focused anxiety of men who are used to reshaping headlines. Jason does not pretend to be sentimental. He lays out a ledger of options: a temporary injunction from a federal court, a vote at the board to appoint an interim stewardship, escrow of the Sharon shares, forensic audit of chain of custody. None of it happens with a snap. It moves because men like Jason have networks and leverage. The work is slow but decisive. "You're not a paper," Jason says plainly. "They can try to make you into a cautionary tale. We can buy time, and time is your weapon." Lina listens. Her voice is huskier than usual. "I don't want to be saved by other people's pity." "This isn't pity," Jason replies.
It's calculation, and right now, calculation is on your side. They act. Letters go out. Lawyers file documents that spend their morning like ammunition. A judge issues an emergency stay on any change of controlling interest in the company until a forensic audit completes. The bank imposes a temporary hold on transfer of major assets. It's not a coronation. It is a cordon that keeps a city from deciding her fate for a few more hours. But the hold on transfers doesn't silence the city. Headlines bloom like oil on water. Delivery girl claims share in heir. Engagement turns to boardroom war. Talk shows sniff the story like hounds. Commentators pineapple the outrage into ratings. Vivian's face is everywhere, a rehearsed smile on loop. Michael's denial is carefully put together, a dozen rehearsed statements that look practiced and therefore less than faithful. Beneath the media storm, work continues.
Jason pushes for one thing above all: find out who touched the samples. He can already picture the legal strategy: prove tampering, show chain of custody breaks, force the court to treat the original documents and the initial verdict as tainted. They go back to the lab first, to the fluorescent room where Lina sat the night before. Forensics is a slow, patient animal. They pull camera footage, interrogate technicians, log the flow of envelopes. The lab that processed the night's DNA is a rented temporary unit that runs for the event. Perfect for optics, but perfect for manipulation. The camera above the bench is a small eye in a wide ceiling. Jason freezes frames until a tiny hand movement resolves into something ugly. A man in a dark suit leans, just off camera, and the lab tech lowers his hand to a tray, a little slight, practiced. The technician wipes his palms, breathes, then looks at the man and smiles. They trace the man across the footage to a familiar name: Kevin, one of Michael's quieter fixers, the man who carried the folder at the table. Kevin's face is near perfectly controlled even when Jason's legal subpoena orders him to a conference room. He answers in short sentences, then in longer ones, then in nothing at all. It was a mistake, Kevin tells them finally, his eyes glassy with the strain of performing innocence. His story is tidy: pressure, a panic call, a favor to the wrong people. His hands shake when he says the words, "They promised fast results." He talks about an envelope slid between copies, about a slip in labeling that could be explained away if records are edited. His voice cracks around the edges. Jason listens and files the confession. He says nothing about mercy. He says everything into a recorder. The confession is not the entire truth. It rarely is. It is the hinge the investigators will use, the weak spot they will pry open. Vivian's advantage collapses like a folding chair under questioning. Journalists pivot on Kevin's voice. The boardroom that once applauded Michael's gesture now studies each other with the cautious look of people who have been told the house may have hidden termites. But the rotten censor is more extensive than a single ticketed favor. The cameras from the night show another hand, another sleeve, a movement so quick it might be a trick. When Jason and his team pull the private feed from the tuxedoed photographer at the far end of the room, they find a cleaner shot. A man in a charcoal jacket stepping between the lab tech and the boxes, as if guided by knowledge the rest of the crowd lacks. He never looks directly at the lens. He never needs to. Lucas Sharon watches the footage without comment. The brothers don't need to parade emotion. Their faces are machines of policy. Lucas folds his hands and chooses words like scalpel cuts. "We will allow the legal to work," he says. But if Lucia's, he corrects himself quickly, if justice is obstructed, our family has resources to press for truth. There is a new tone in the company, not the loud public smiles of power, but the low, metallic hum of men who will break whatever they must to correct the problem. Alfred returns to Lina twice in the morning. Each time he brings something: a small envelope with a faded photograph, a note from someone who claims to remember Lina's grandmother, a map of names that mean little to Lina at first but later become crucial. He moves like a man with keys. He is not a soldier, but his knowledge is a different kind of weapon, memory. He tells Lina the stories not as nostalgia, but as evidence. A registry number burned into a ring, a midwife's certificate with a scribble that matches the script on the crest, a ledger entry in a merchant's account that shows a tie the family kept secret. For Lina, this is the difference between rumor and history. You have names, Alfred says simply, not all of them printed in glossy bulletins. Some things are stored where men don't think to look for them. The manila envelope Jason slipped onto the table the night before contained more than promises. It contained powers quietly signed by a handful of men who value stealth over declaration. By noon, an emergency convening of the company's board is called. Michael arrives with a face that has learned to rehearse indignation. He packs the room with allies, lawyers whose smiles are algorithmic, and 3 new proxies signed with signatures that will be scrutinized. What he does not know is that the Sharon reach has already moved. Lucas sends a short message to a private bank in Geneva. Logan calls a law firm in London. The patriarch's emissary, known to many as Mr. Geller, a man with no official public title but whose voice moves contracts like wind moves leaves. Geller does not enter on ceremony. He waits at the polished doorway, hands folded, eyes angles like a hawk's. When he speaks, it is with the gravity of someone who has held more than money. "We will see the original registry," he says. "We will see the seals." His tone is not judgmental, it is assumptive. He asks for what a family like Sharon always asks: evidence, formality, and the right to adjudicate in private when public spectacle fails. Geller pulls out a small leather folio and with a motion as plain as breath produces a single sheet with a seal that some of the older board members recognize. A ledger page stamped with an ink the modern eye forgets. The seal is not merely ornamental, it's a legal breadcrumb. It ties Lina's small hammered ring, the one hidden under her collar, to a line of names in a ledger that goes back decades. The archivists in the room breathe as if someone has opened a window after a long, suffocating night. That ledger takes them back to a small dispensary in a port town, where Lina's grandmother traded linens for gossip and coffee for small favors. Its numbers are not the kind that hang on a bank's balance sheet. They are the secret accounting of family obligation. The link is modest, but it is legal enough in the eyes of a family that handles both the letter of the law and the unspoken edges beyond it. The ledger, combined with Kevin's shaky confession and the camera footage that shows sample tampering, is a rope strong enough to drag a story back into the light. A second test is arranged, this time under conditions that cannot be quietly compromised. An independent laboratory, sealed chain of custody, attended by representatives of the Sharon, the board, and a neutral court-ordered overseer. The Sharon brothers demand and receive full access. Cameras are set across the room. Envelopes are signed by multiple witnesses. Even the most cynical in the company feels the gravity. This is not theater. It is legal theater where everyone knows their lines but hopes the script bends in their favor. Vivian sits as if she will be declared triumphant and as if the announcement is merely delayed by protocol. Her smile is smaller. The night has not yet forgiven her for appearing too comfortable holding another woman's crest. The new DNA run is methodical. The machines were like other machines, steady, indifferent. This time, the samples are not only human tissue, but also an old blood card from a safety deposit box under the Sharon seal. The card belonged to Lina's grandmother, recorded decades ago and kept as an heirloom by the family. It bears markers that modern labs can read and compare. The test will not grant mythology. It will supply statistical probability. The two results align, a match with high certainty.
When the printout curls from the machine and the technician, this time a woman with a careful, unsmiling face, reads the data, the room releases a noise that is not quite a collective breath and not quite a cry. It sounds like someone closing a heavy door. Vivian goes pale. Her supporters shrink into the background like paper figures in a wind tunnel. Michael's jaw works. He reaches for a legalist quip and finds nothing that will fit. Match confirmed, the technician says, unclipping the printed sheet. Subject A is highly likely to share a matrilineal line with the reference. Lucas reads it and lets out a sound that might be approval or something colder. He looks at Lina, then at the folio, then at Geller. "We will proceed to public recognition," he says, and his voice is the clear edge of a blade. But the family's will to correct the record does not require spectacle. We'll do this cleanly. Cleanly, in Sharon terms, means two things: legal thoroughness and theatrical finality. They stage a press conference in the company's atrium that evening. The same chandeliers hang above, but now the spotlights are disciplined.
The crowd that gathers is equal parts curiosity and fear. Journalists, shareholders, lobbyists, and a scattering of VIPs who sense that the city is broadcasting a new hierarchy. On the dais, the brothers stand like mineral. Beside them, Jason and other corporate allies stand like pillars of legitimacy. Geller steps forward, holding an envelope stamped with the family's mark. He does not hand it to Lina immediately. He allows the room to watch. The cameras lean in. "Lina Harris," Lucas begins, his voice slow and authoritative. "After independent review, after verification of document integrity and biological lineage," the room is a held thing. Michael sits flushed, his smile a thin membrane that the air keeps threatening to break. Vivian, too, sits as if waiting for an inevitable and humiliating correction. She touches the crest in her lap as if it will burn her fingers if left unguarded. "We recognize Lina Harris as a direct descendant in the Sheeran line," Lucas finishes. This recognition carries with it not a promise of violence, but a transfer of responsibility. Effective immediately, an interim board will be formed to oversee the assets tied to the Sheeran shares. Lina Harris will be represented on that board with the authority to appoint an interim chief executive. The press explodes in a controlled avalanche. Cameras click like rain. Reporters pitch questions that ricochet and fall. Michael rises, the first to try to salvage dignity with words. "This is a rush to judgment," he begins, but the brothers let him speak, and they let the room hear the thinness in his tone. People listen, but their ears are tuned for the finality of Lucas's seal, for the subtlety of Geller's nod. Geller reaches into his envelope, but he does not produce a manifesto of vengeance. He produces instead a single card, black and heavy, embossed with the Sheeran knot. He lays it on the podium. The act is symbolic, a sign that their decision is not merely a corporate motion, but one that carries a name that is feared and respected in the city's undercurrents. The black card will, in coming days, translate into a legal instrument. Some described it later as the family's shadow signature. Others call it the stamp of an influence that refuses to be solely lawful or unlawful. Lina steps forward when her name comes, and the air narrows in on her like a camera that suddenly finds focus. She expects to feel the old shame like a tide returning, but instead she notices the small detail that always had meant something in her body, the necklace against her skin, where it never once lost its warmth. She lifts her chin. Her voice is quieter than many expect. There is fatigue and a steel in it that is still new. "I did not come here for crowns," she says plainly. "I came here for answers," the microphones drink the words. They milk them for their human drama. She continues, "But I will accept responsibility where evidence shows it belongs." The acceptance is not abject. It is not giddy. It is not repentance. It is a rational assumption of duty, with the exact amount of grace a woman with nothing to offer but her will can afford. The voting documents are shuffled. Legal papers begin to move with a speed that shocks even the watchers. An emergency resolution passes with the weight of the Chiron backing, combined with the practical votes of lawyers and a handful of shareholders who sense a safer harbor in stability than in chaos. The board appoints an interim executive team that includes Jason Reed as chief operating officer and a respected compliance officer as general counsel. Lina is granted representation on the board and veto authority over immediate asset transfers. It is not absolute power, but it is enough to prevent Michael from liquidating what remains of his control with a midnight stroke. When Michael stands and realizes his removal from the board is effectively sealed, his face cracks. It is not theatricalness he fears most. It is the sudden absence of institutional cover. Without the board, his ability to command the company's machinery dwindles. He retreats into a rage that looks like a man counting the measure of his losses. Vivian leaves the hall under a blur of cameras and murmurs. She tries to speak to reporters. Her words, about being misled, about having loved the family legacy, sound brittle. Later, a statement will emerge that she was an unwitting pawn, paid and instructed by intermediaries with promises of security. The intermediaries are scant fingers pointing to other corners of the map. Investigations begin. Subpoenas quietly travel. Lina sits at a table later that evening and signs the formal documents. The pen is heavier when she touches it. She is no stranger to small paperwork, rental agreements, employment forms, but these signatures feel like placing stones in a structure that some men have tried to keep above the cracks of their own morality. She signs for an interim trust to hold the shares until the legalities are fully resolved. She signs declarations that ensure the corporate governance arm cannot be undermined by back-channel tricks. Each signature pulls her body into a new role. When the final document is signed, the room breathes differently. There is a satisfaction in the air, but it is not innocent. For all the clatter of cameras and the shuffle of papers, Lina knows something the papers cannot capture. The Chiron family name is not merely a corporate asset. It is a machine of social authority and extra legal weight. When they claim you, you inherit both the good and the threat. The patriarch does not arrive that night. He never arrives when people expect spectacle. But his power arrives via a message, a simple audio file played for the inner circle in the privacy of Lucas's study. The voice is low and older than rumor. It says nothing dramatic. Welcome, be careful, consolidate. It is an admonition and a benediction. It carries with it a promise that someone with resources and a will shaped by long winters will watch the situation closely. At a quieter hour, Lina finds herself alone in an office that spans 3 windows. The city below perfumes the glass, smells of traffic and frying oil and the hard, cold tang of money. Jason leaves a list of immediate priorities: internal communications, a staff meeting to reassert protections for employees, security audits, and a forensic team to continue the probe into the tampering. They will not let the story recede. They will let it be processed and sanitized by the parts of the world that care about legality. The parts that care about retribution will be handled differently. Alfred comes in with soup and a look like a man who has fought a long, narrow war for a life no one noticed. He has folded the ledger page into a worn corner. He sits. When they crowned you in mockery, you held your truth close like a small, bright coin, he says. You did not let them spend it. They thought that meant nothing. It meant everything. Lina closes her eyes. What happens to the people who hurt us? Alfred's face, lit by the streetlight slipping under the curtain, does not offer platitudes. He is a man tempered by years of loyalty and disillusionment. Some will be paid in law, he says. Some must be paid in humiliation of their own. But we must choose our first blows. Choose them to protect, not to indulge. She is quiet for a moment. In her pocket, she fingers the small blue stone, the relic that tonight has become a public thing. It is no longer simply a token. It is a key. Her first acts as a steward of power are practical and small and meaningful.
She calls for an independent review of company staffing at the highest levels. She orders an audit of all charitable arms that used to be anonymous pockets for favors. She pulls the resources that once enriched the board into processes that will require transparency. In meetings, she speaks in measured sentences. She asks questions that reveal who is bold and who is coward. She does not seek revenge in the early hours. She seeks stabilizing moves that ensure the company's public face cannot be easily purchased again. Outside, Michael rages like a man in love with his own architecture. He calls old friends, threatens and then apologizes, tries to buy back slides of trust with money and promises. All his offers are met with cool disclaimers and legal buffers. The men he thought loyal, a broker here, an editor there, call him to say they cannot be associated with actions now tied to accusations of tampering. But the story does not end with a haircut of consequences for the predictable players. The deeper danger, the vein under the muscle of the night's betrayals, is that someone higher than Michael, someone who trades in futures and whispers, had motives beyond a simple corporate takeover.
That notion tightens like a string around the town's heart. Who has the reach to plant evidence, to move samples, to buy loyalty? Vivian's layers unpeel slowly in the days that follow. Under pressure, she confesses partial truths. A man who called himself a consultant promised a place for her and some financial security if she played along. She swears she thought it was legitimate. Video footage proves bribery, not a coordinated crime ring. Her apology is public and tepid. For some, punishment is public embarrassment and a few lost contracts. For others, it is prosecution that moves with premeditated slowness. In the corridors of power, however, there are whispers far louder and more dangerous than prosecutions. A broker in a dark bar mentions a name that is not Michael, a name of someone who sits safely outside public boards, but whose signature touches the ledger like an invisible hand. The name travels fast into 3 phones, Lucas's, Geller's, and Jason's. They listen more than they speak. The implication hangs in the air like cold fog. There are people who profit from instability. There are people who create it. The Sharon patriarch is not naive. He is a man who understands that casualties stack for advantage in a world where fear is currency. Lina navigates all these things with a surprising facility. She is learning to be careful with her words. She learns to demand transparency from allies while cultivating a silence useful to the family. She practices her speech, the cadence of a leader who will not be defined by the night's humiliation, but by the disciplined exercise of decisions. She also discovers a private pleasure. Small, private consolidations that feel like taking back what was once stolen. Michael's office is cleared of his personal effects under her orders. His photograph with the mayor gets taken down. A plaque with an old dedication, his proudest moment, gets replaced with a tasteful, neutral board statement. These acts are petty and precise. She feels no shame in them. And yet, she keeps mercy in one pocket. When Michael begs, less theatrical now and more feral, she hears the rhythm of a man who cannot forgive himself. She offers him a choice privately. Leave quietly, accept the settlement that requires him to exit completely and publicly renounce his role as a family proxy, or choose litigation and prolong the matter until the city consumes them both. He chooses, messily, the first. It's a humiliating departure. He signs a resignation letter on a rainy morning, his hand unsteady. He leaves the building under a film of indifferent cameras. But departure is not freedom. In the anonymous rooms of the city, a figure waits, wallet thicker now, that invests in slighter men like Michael. Michael reaches out. He cannot help himself. Old habits are teeth. A line is drawn and someone else begins to pick up the pieces. On a late afternoon, while Lina is in a meeting about corporate social responsibility, Alfred calls her on the quiet line. He says a few words that stop her whole body.
There are letters, he tells her, from a man who once watched over your grandmother. He asked after you. The letters arrive in a package worn with travel and the kind of dust that makes old wood confess to long journeys. Inside are thin pages of handwriting and the name of a place Lina has only heard in stories, a coastal town where her grandmother had once worked. The writer signs a name Lina has not seen in any ledgers, Matteo. The name is not a family one. It is a thread. Some nights later, in a room that is small but clean, Lina reads the old letters under lamplight. Matteo had known her grandmother. He had been a friend when the Chiron were young merchants and when favors were still paid by cups of sugar, and not by board votes. He mentions a chest, one that Lina's grandmother hid before she disappeared. The chest contained 3 things: the silver ring she kept, a folded deed, and a last note to the family. The note contains a direction. If trouble ever came, find Mr. Geller. It is a map back to the family's reticence and an archival memory that places Lina's claim not just in blood, but in a web of obligations. The chest is in a place that no one had thought to check, a safety deposit in a small bank under a mountain, an odd legal relic the Chiron used once and then forgot. Geller, quiet and precise, arranges the retrieval. When the chest is opened in the presence of a lawyer, an archivist, and an older Chiron cousin who remembers names that sound like music to the family, there is a small, folded certificate. It is a notarized, hand-scripted note. In the event of a lost line, the house recognizes the bearer of a specific token. The token is described: a hammered ring with a blue stone. There is a signature that looks like a name older than the city. This is not the kind of evidence that belongs in the headlines. It is the kind bond that the Chiron family keeps in places the public rarely sees. When the chest opens and the certificate is read, Lucas places his palm over his mouth for a heartbeat. The Brotherhood is a machine built on the slow accumulation of such moments, those small, decisive relics that a family like theirs hoards. For Lina, the chest's opening is not merely vindication. It is a confirmation that the world that once belonged to her in rumor has pieces that belong back to her in reality. Now comes the decision of tone and a future. The Chiron family owns a paradox. They can crush like a thumb, or they can protect like a wall. For Lina, the choice is clearer than it has ever been. She could burn them all in a pyre of personal vengeance and find the heat satisfying. Or she could build a shield around people who never had anyone before. Her moral line is not drawn by sentiment, but by a strategic kindness that she calls justice. She chooses both protection and warning.
At a formal ceremony, quiet, restrained, Lina receives the family's symbolic items. Not the blunt king-making patina of a throne, but a small pouch, a black card, a ledger entry, and a note with the patriarch's restrained handwriting. Use knowledge well. The patriarch's words are few, but his meaning is clear. Power grants capacity, capacity demands responsibility. When she steps out of the family room, the city has already recorded the change. The feed of the day catches a new Lina. No longer the trembling girl of the banquet, but a woman with a precise set of shoulders and a glance that suggests calculation. The necklace is visible now, thin against the collar of a blouse tailored to a simpler taste. It's not a necklace worn like trophy, it's worn like a key. Her first public instruction as the family's recognized steward is not dramatic. She commands the company to launch an audit into the philanthropic arms that once funneled influence without disclosure. She orders a review of worker contracts to ensure no one is left vulnerable by the conflicts of interest that cost her dignity. Her decisions are not merely theatrical. They are instruments of governance and, she hopes, a form of atonement. There are a few who whisper that she will be merciless. There are others who shrug, saying power tends to make saints of pragmatists. Her true shape will be visible over the months to come as she consolidates. Even as she consolidates, Lina is not naive.
She knows prisons are not only steel and stone. Some are made of public gaze and private debts. The city has changed the color of her skin. It sees her now differently. The Chiron name is painted on a greater canvas around her. Men who once looked down now look up, with something like calculation in their eyes. On the edge of these new calculations is Michael. He disappears into the city's underbelly, renting cheap rooms and angling for a way back into the light. Then a silhouette meets him in a diner 2 towns over. He speaks in frantic, halting sentences about unfairness and being set up. The silhouette listens, and when Michael says a name, Lina's name, the silhouette laughs in a small way that is almost tender. People like us, the silhouette murmurs, are always good for 1 or 2 mistakes, but there's another way to settle accounts. The series of scenes that follow are not public. They are the cautionary shadows in this story's margin. A man with a new card, a whisper of money, a promise that a wound can be reopened. Michael leaves the diner with a look that is equal parts defeat and determination. He is a man smaller than the empire that built him, but he still carries the appetite of a person convinced he has only been cheated out of his due. Back in the bright offices that now answer to Lina's cautious rule, life moves forward. The press continues to write, investigations proceed, the board meets.
Lina learns the names of people who will be lifelong allies and of those whose loyalty was purchasable. She makes lists in a notebook with a pen that never seems to dry. She writes the name of those she will trust, and beside it, the name she will watch. At the edge of the month, she steps into a small televised segment that becomes the headline of the week. The interviewer asks the trivial question about family, about mercy, about whether she plans retribution. Lina's answer is a tight, controlled thing. People who hurt others must face consequences, she says. But consequences must be proportionate and just. My job is to protect the company and the people who make it more than the men who thought of it as their toy. The answer is ambiguous enough to satisfy the sympathetic and the wary. Some call it wise, some call it cold. Both are true. The city watches the woman who was humiliated at the altar now move in the orbit of power. For some, she becomes a symbol, a new kind of leader shaped by odd odds. For others, a new threat. For Lina, the ascension is not celebration so much as a study in management, of people, of reputation, and of the moral cost of authority. In private, she makes one small final choice that tastes like a beginning. She goes back to the modest room she once called home, now a place where she sends clothes for mending and pays a receptionist's salary. She walks to the window and sees a street vendor who once knew her grandmother lighting a small lantern. Lina goes down, approaches him, and places a small envelope in his hand. It is not money meant for thanks. It is a contract of protection, the first of many such gestures that will make her name something other than a rumor's end. She signs a document that will place small stakes into the hands of people she trusts, and in doing so, she draws a map of loyalties as precise as graphite on the page. She realizes power is not merely striking back, it is building structures so that the city will not turn its people into pawns again. Still, a shadow lingers. When she returns to the office late, there is a file on her desk with a single photograph inside. Michael and a silhouette at the diner. Heads close, hands on the table. On the back, someone has written a single word, unanswered. Lina studies the photograph for a long time. There is no dramatic scream, nor immediate act of vengeance. The work of reclamation that began with a public humiliation evolves into a long, deliberate orchestration. She will not be theatrical in the early days, she will be meticulous. She will cut precisely and put systems in place to ensure that the petty cruelties that once took people's livelihoods are less likely to recur. She will accept the kind of power that demands late nights and tough decisions, not just headlines.
At the end of the week, she steps into the atrium where, months before, a ring had been offered and a crest stolen. The chandelier still scatters light like a constellation.
The room that once laughed at her now stands in a fold of silence when she enters. She walks to the center, where once a crest dove into someone's pocket, and places her hand on the podium. The necklace glints openly now. It is no longer hidden. It is a part of her. She speaks into the quiet with a voice honed by loss and determination. "They humiliated me at the altar," she says slowly, "and the cameras do not need to lean in. They already are. They try to make my life a cautionary tale. But I am not a caution. I am a steward. I will protect what has value, the people who make this company work, the truth, and the wages of honest labor. If anyone wants to test me, they will find this house is more than a building. It is a responsibility." Her words hang in the air. They are a promise and a warning. Some people will interpret them as mercy, others as danger. Both are correct. Outside, someone watches from a car across the street. Inside, a man on a cheap motel bed opens his phone and sees the broadcast. Michael's jaw tenses. He closes his fist. The shadow that has been following his small missteps stirs. A new game begins where the pieces are less predictable than before. Lina knows the story isn't finished. Recognition and signatures do not absolve all wounds. There are enemies who will not sleep, allies who will grow impatient, and secrets the city still keeps. She plans her next moves like a chess player 3 steps ahead. Secure legal lines, consolidate the company's charitable foundation, and begin quiet, targeted investigations into who else benefited by her humiliation. She finishes that evening by turning off the lights in her office and looking at her reflection in the glass. The woman who looks back is not entirely familiar. The curve of her jaw is more determined, the set of her mouth less inclined to apologetic smiles. She traces the outline of her necklace with a thumb and closes the window, letting the city's lights settle into the night like stars that know nothing of human promises. A soft knock comes on the door. It is Captain Luis, the security chief with a loyalty that has been tested. He hands her a small folder and says, "There are still risks." Lina opens the folder. Inside, there are names, timelines, and a photograph that is blurred but ominous. She nods. "We proceed," she says. Outside, the city carries a rumor like a lantern. The woman humiliated at the altar is now the hidden heiress of the most dangerous name in the city. It is a phrase that promises both protection and peril. She rises, closes the folder, and looks out over the lights. Power, she has learned, is not a sudden light. It is a slow building warmth that eventually consumes or protects. She intends to choose the kind of warmth that builds. If you want to follow what she does next, how she consolidates authority, who truly lit the match that burned her life, and whether Michael will return from the edges to reclaim his ruin, watch the next episode in this series. The city is patient, so are those who have learned the value of waiting.